Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited. I have my new friend Hussain with me. Hussain, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we're going to talk about AI and Revic.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to kind of talk a little bit about Revic and more broadly the kind of changes on the AI side. So just a little background on me. Been in go-to-market for 20 plus years. Started on the technical side and then did a series of transitions. Worked at companies like EMC, Symantec, and then early stage startups that we were able to exit. And then about 2 years ago, took a little bit of a leap of faith and started my own company, Revic, focused on kind of AI for go-to-market teams, thinking that there's a lot of opportunities to help create more human-to-human connections, and so that was kind of the driver for us.
I love that, and I want to underline something because I hear a lot of doom and gloom about AI, and you said a couple of my favorite phrases. Number one, human to human, but the other was AI as an enabler, not as a replacer. And I think that's we'll probably cover both of those. But let's talk about Revic. So you founded that a couple of years ago. What has surprised you about that, and where are you seeing your company go in the next couple of years?
I think there's a couple of things that have surprised us. One, how big the problems are on the go-to-market side. Like, you obviously know it, but you know it from, like, I only knew it from my world. Like, all the clunkiness, the challenges, how it's like it's really near impossible to be on the go-to-market side and be effective because you're so dependent on so many other functions producing and delivering at the level you need them to, and most of your work is like trying to, like, just feels like pulling teeth. And so surprised by how viscerally, like, people react to that. And that's obviously given us a lot of tailwind. And to be honest, the other thing that's really a surprise is, like, as a company, we're coming in and saying to customers, like, hey, we need to see all your revenue data in order to build intelligence around our AI platform. And we're early stage startup. Like, for companies to agree to turning over some of the most sensitive information, we thought that would be much harder, but because there's so much desperation around driving growth and efficient growth, people have been much more receptive than we thought. We put in a lot of security controls, and we've realized, like, nobody asks about those things because they're like, no, we just need to go fix this now. And so that's been a little bit of a surprise, but obviously a positive one for us. But yeah.
I love that. And, one thing I'll share, I love go to market as a concept because I'm tired of the old marketing versus sales versus operations. I see it as one, three parts of one system. But it does fascinate me how in the day and age of vibe coding, everybody's skipping the security part. And I know your background, you've put a lot of thought into the security. I find it scary that you're worried about it more than your clients are, but that's a side note, not a criticism.
I mean, it really talks to, like, where organization, like, where the power centers are inside of organizations. Like, the CFO is probably the strongest power center inside of an organization, but, like, very, like, close second is the revenue organization. So, like, it makes sense that they basically can push the organization into places where it may feel uncomfortable or move faster than they expect. And so it's not too crazy. But coming back to your point about, like, marketing or revenue operations or sales, like, those are all internal constructs, meaning, like, customers don't care about those things. Customers care about, like,
Man,
I have a
can we just
problem.
underline that? Customers don't care.
Those are, like, the things we do because it makes it easier for us to, like, structure our organization to react and engage with our customers. Like, customers just want a consistent voice and consistent experience, and they want to feel special. Like, we think internally about this concept of, like, every customer should feel like a segment of one. Which, you can do. You historically, you could do it at the enterprise scale when we were at Symantec and we're selling to the top 10 companies on earth, like, yeah, okay, there's a team of people that are just focused on this one organization, but every customer wants to feel special, like, and they should feel special.
And I think so. You and I are going to be friends, and sorry, but I don't talk to many people who get the umbrella. And I tried to explain things, and when I talk to somebody in marketing, they go, "Oh, you're a marketer," and then I talk to somebody in sales, and they go, "Oh, you're a sales guy," and then I talk to customer service, and they go, "Oh, you're one of us," and it's like, again, artificial boundaries that I spend all my day trying to convince people that nobody cares. Your customers do not want to be in a funnel. They do not want to be in a sales process. And God forbid they don't want that awkward silence between I paid and somebody hasn't reached out yet. So you and I are going to have a fun chat. So let's talk about what you actually do at a human level, because I think you're talking my language. And I love with technology, we can do that market of one, even for, like, we've got data. I mean, DoorDash can tell you what people eat in what neighborhoods. Like, we have that data. So how are you seeing data and AI helping businesses? Let's forget doom and gloom, because that's a boring conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I think let's anchor on the kind of the thing, like, the data is all in service of one thing, especially from a go-to-market perspective, which is that human-to-human connection, that interaction that makes that customer really special. I think over the last, like, 10 years, we've gotten a plethora of tools that generate a tremendous amount of data that we haven't figured out how to appropriately connect and make into a information, or really what we think is like an intelligence layer, that we can then use to, like, have some meaningful insights or conversations with customers. Historically, like, all this data, somebody had to figure out how to, like, jam together, whether it's RevOps, and then they handed a bunch of different tools to the sales team to then become, like, almost in effect a data analyst. And we trusted each seller to try to figure out the right insights, pull out the right insights that they need. So each seller was figuring this out individually. And so we basically think about, like, that as a big problem. And more kind of concretely and more specifically in the way we think about the problem is that we think about every customer, the customer one, and having a dynamic point of view for each one of those customers that sales, marketing, or customer success can all use. So, like, hey, here's the current story of this account, regardless of the data source, regardless if it comes from call recordings, public data, private data, it doesn't really matter. We need to have a dynamic point of view on this account that we can then use to actually take action off of it, whether that's a person doing it or a person enabled with agents. It doesn't really matter. The hard part is being able to have that dynamic point of view on this account, and then we can start to solve bigger problems. Like, hey, if we can have a dynamic point of view on thousands of accounts, we can tell a customer, and this is what we do today, we can tell a customer, these are the companies you should be talking to right now.
Yeah.
And you should ignore the other 2/3 or X percentage that your organization is focused on, because they just have no relevancy. They're not interested in talking to you, so you shouldn't waste your time to talk to them.
I love it. And I will share up front, because I think it's relevant. I literally worship at the altar of Chet Holmes. I think he was brilliant before his time. And one of the things that literally makes me weep at night is when you look at a business and you think about, here's marketing. We have our little silo. We've got our statistics, and we can tell you everything about clicks and likes and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then you got the CRM silo for the salespeople. And then on the other side, you've got this amazing, usually a support ticketing system or some sort of customer support. And nobody's actually looking at those three pieces of data. Personally, I think that customer support is the gold for marketing and sales. I mean, if somebody complains about a problem consistently, you either have to solve the problem or you find an educational tool or something. But it fascinates me that people don't look at those three sets of data points.
For sure. I mean, to be honest, like, I was lucky enough to be part of EMC in the early 2000s. And I was there as an SE, so I started there as an SE and then transitioned to the sales world, to the dark side. But the first thing when you join EMC, like their whole thing, the whole mantra of EMC was like customer first, and it's everybody says that, but it's really hard to get an organization to truly believe it, and it's one of the few organizations I've been part of it. It's actually something I've always tried to replicate in every organization I've been part of. The first thing that they taught us as SCs is that, hey, you set up a notification on every one of your accounts that when a support ticket gets opened, the support person has to call you before they call the customer. And the premise of that was there were two goals with that. One goal was, hey, you should know everything that's happening in your account, whether it's pre-sales or post-sales, it doesn't matter. And two, you get a chance to see the support personnel with all the context that you have about the account, so that when they called the customer, they weren't asking the 10 generic questions that we already knew as an organization. So we basically were doing manually what you're basically suggesting was like, hey, we have all this information. Today, we're at a place, like this is in the early 2000s, like we're at a place where we can provide a consistent story around every account so that everybody that interacts with that organization can have, a consistent point of view. On some level, that was the promise of CRM, but CRM, the current versions of CRMs grew up way too early in the stack. Yeah. And so they're not prepared for the amount of volume that's data volume that exists. But the bigger problem is that they're really great at systems of records. They can store a ton of information, a ton of data, but they rely on the salesperson or the customer success person or the marketing person to synthesize that and condense that into a narrative that they can have on an organization. Like we think like we should use AI to do all that. That's better for AI to synthesize a tremendous amount of information and say, hey, these are the 4 or 5 things that are happening in this account that are really interesting to talk about.
And I think that's the amazing thing is if we look at AI, I don't look at it as how can I get rid of my people? How do I eliminate? I look at it as what can I do? If you give good data to a rock star marketing person, rock star salesperson, customer support, they'll solve problems you didn't know you had.
I think that's one of you just kind of hit it, Jeff, which is like the thing that gets me really excited about AI is that it brings truth to every position. And what I mean by truth is like, you hire salespeople to have conversations with customers, and have like very deeply personal human level conversations. You hire marketers to figure out like, how do you take complex concepts and synthesize them and narrate them in a way that's like deeply resonant with that's like with customers. That's the real work. Yeah. But we end up spending so much of the time on this other stuff to be able to be in a position to do that work. And I think one of the things that's really exciting about AI is it really unlocks people to do the thing that they really are excited to do and really hired to do. And I think like that's what's really exciting. Now, if you're in the job of like trying to synthesize all this information, your job is potentially at risk. That's for sure. You do need to transition on AI can be a massive enabler. Like to give you an example, we hired a gentleman who came from another go-to-market centric, pretty notable company. He was part of the what they call an engineering world ETL team. So they take a bunch of information, transform it, and make it usable for machine learning models. He had 10 or 12 people doing this work. For us, he's doing it by himself. He's actually a quarter of his time is dedicated to that because he's just set up so much AI agentry to do all the work that he had people doing that we don't need a team of 10, 12 people. Yes, but like the part that's really hard is like, how do I build logic and intelligence to teach the agents the stuff that I need?
I think that's actually the other path I see. A lot of, I'm going to call them experts in air quotes. You'll know what I mean in a second. There's a lot of young people who've never worked in marketing or sales. All of a sudden, they're building what they're calling agents, which I still struggle with the difference between an agent and a chatbot. It hurts my head when people don't know the difference. But I love what you're building, because first and foremost, and this is what I always say about AI, you actually know what you're talking about. So when you build a go-to-market solution, that is a critical distinction between, the discount chatbots out there.
You're 100% like that. Your domain expertise matters a tremendous amount. Even like when we hire our people, we're looking for people with an extensive amount of experience. Like, so there was like this fear that, hey, this starts to attack at the people that are like hyper experienced. I actually think that that's like not found. Like that's a ridiculous concept. I think the people that have all this like incredible experiential knowledge are so much more valuable now. The other side of it, like the thing that people don't really realize, like there's a lot of this like communication that says like entry level jobs or early career people are at risk as well. I don't agree with that either, because those tend to be AI native, and so they are pushing the boundaries of what you could do with AI. The people that I think are struggling a little bit are the people that haven't made it over the hump on domain expertise, so that they feel confident and comfortable with the amount of knowledge they have, and realize like the knowledge is in service of solving a problem. So maybe to say it differently, like I don't care what tool we use to solve the problem, or what mechanism and methodology we use. They're just tools, and you get there after X number of times of making mistakes. You realize it's just tactics that are things. But people that have learned one tactic are too focused on that tactic, and a lot of those tactics are now consumed by AI. So those are the people that I think need a lot of help and a lot of coaching to like get past the philosophical battle of like, this is the one way you do these things. No, there's 100 ways to do these things. So but completely aligned with you. Like I think it's a real, to me, especially on the go-to-market space, we're coming back to the truth of the job. It's not about updating this or doing that, like all this internal stuff. It's about just having really meaningful conversations. And if AI can help us have more of those meaningful conversations, sales becomes really exciting, marketing becomes really exciting, and RevOps actually becomes more fun, because you're not sitting there you're not sitting there like banging your head on the wall trying to get salespeople to like absorb all this information that you've been looking at.
It's funny. I worked at a multi-billion-dollar company. I won't name names because I'm about to drop some criticism, but they invested heavily in a very large CRM that is literally everybody knows it, and they spent a lot of money on the CRM, but they cheaped out on the implementation of it. So we had literally 30 different places as a salesperson to go find data. And I would just throw up my hands, because every time I'd clean the CRM, they'd go buy some garbage list off of, they found in a dumpster. And I'd be like, I can't find my leads in the CRM. So I started building my own private little CRM on the side. And, literally one of our job requirements as a salesperson, I was required to spend 4 out of 8 hours every day maintaining the database.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you want me to close deals? And they're like, well, you'll only close deals if you maintain the database. And I'm like, I don't understand the connection between that busy work and the activity of, my job is to talk to people, not.
You're spot on. And I think that's the conundrum that most organizations are in, is that what you're incenting your salespeople to do is different than what's in the best interest of the organization. At times, there's like conflict there, right? Like the organization needs visibility so that they have predictability on the revenue side, which makes sense, right? Like that's if they don't have that, the CFO and the CRO are in trouble. But the sales, the rank and file don't care about that, right? That generally, and I don't know what kind of sales organizations you were part of, but like all the sales organizations I was part of, I got an annual number. I didn't really care. I cared because my boss told me, hey, it matters to me this quarter versus that quarter, but my comp structure wasn't set up that way, so I didn't care. I didn't care about updating Salesforce. I was perennially on the naughty list of like, hey, did you do this? I mean, I remember one time I made a mistake and I put a $3 billion opportunity. I got a call from the CEO, like, what are you doing? I was like, but like, you just get sloppy around these things because like they're not that important. They don't, we have to accept like, hey, that's not what you've hired me to do. That's not what you're going to fire me over.
Yeah.
Maybe too many of those $3 billion mistakes I'll probably get fired over, but you know what I mean? Like, and so I think what we really want to get to is salespeople operating on the job that they're hired to, which is having conversations, marketers doing the same. And then everything else, we can use AI to clean. Like, we have tons of, I have recording technologies up the wazoo, right? Like that I can extract all the insights and automatically update the CRM. And I prefer to do it that way on our side. Like this is what we do internally, rather than having salespeople that have their own subjectivity that they introduce. And now I have to decipher, oh, that person's an optimist, that one's a pessimist, that one's not really good at their job. So they're going to say a bunch of stuff that's not true or is misreading things. Like, I'd rather just have it normalized so that I can get consistency.
I love what you say, because one thing I did find with Salesforce is it's got an amazing number of reports to tell me what I didn't do. So it was, I came to see it as the beating stick, not the tool it was supposed to be.
But think about all the things that you didn't do are things that are really, they're really tend to be quantitative in nature. Like, hey, you didn't have enough meetings, you didn't send enough emails, you didn't, like, that's what the structure is, versus, hey, you didn't have the right set of conversations, you didn't talk about these the right topics, actually you didn't advance, this customer's interest level hasn't increased or decreased. It's very transactional and lacks a lot of the human context element of it. And I think this is where it's like really exciting on the AI side, is like, yeah, we can take all this information and synthesize a story around an account and have a dynamic point of view. Saying like, and we can start at zero, right? So we can say, hey, this account is really interesting for a pursuit, either by sales or marketing. It doesn't really matter. Like they're in the pre-warm up stage, or now they're warmed up and ready for a human conversation. We can have that dynamic point of view. Like with our customers, we've been doing this, and like we've been telling them, hey, these are great accounts for pursuits, and they ask us why, and our technology will tell them why. This is why it's a great. And so you look at the reason why, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I should have a conversation with this customer. Which, rewind 3 years ago, none of the technologies could do that. They'll tell you, here's an account score, or here's a lead score, or whatever. And you're like, well, why? Why is it 62 versus 67? And you're like, well, it's just a statistical model. I can't really explain. It's too many dimensions. Can't really explain it. Well, I can't go to a customer and say, hey, you're a 67 on our scoring mechanism, so we should talk. But I can go to a customer and say, hey, look, it looks like you guys are, we see all these job postings, and in there we can extract that these are probably 3 or 4 of your initiatives. And oh, by the way, we heard your CIO or CMO or CRO talking about this at a podcast.
Yeah.
These seem like things that are priorities. And that's what we're arming our customers' sales teams to do, and marketing teams, is like, hey, these are the things that matter to this organization. And that's really exciting, versus like, hey, have more meetings, or send more emails, or make more phone calls, or increase your talk time. Like those are not interesting.
Yeah. And I find it fascinating that now we live in an age where that data is accessible, relevant, available. And,
Sure.
Again, I'll come back to your comment that the customer doesn't care what their score is in your CRM. I worked at one company, we used chili peppers, and it was arbitrary. It was like, I don't know the difference between somebody who's a 1 and a 5 chili pepper. But if I call somebody and say, well, you're a 5 in the system, that doesn't mean they're waiting for my call to close them on whatever we were selling. So
I think that's like the best, if we just think about everybody as like solving problems that they're being incented to go solve, like 5 chili peppers doesn't really tell you, it doesn't prep you for a conversation.
Yeah.
Then you take the 5 chili peppers and you're going to be like, okay, what are the sales plays that I'm supposed to run? Okay. And then how do I figure out which of these 3 or 4 or 5 sales plays I should run? You're basically relying on like, muscle memory to be like, I think it's probably this one, but let me see if I can call some people that can give me some insights. Let me do some research. Let me do all this stuff. Like we can just like collapse and be like, hey, this is a great account. This is why. Here's the conversation you should have. This is the person you should have this conversation. And this is their personal motivations, because you can kind of glean a lot of this from LinkedIn and other sources. Like it's and here's like our history with this person, if we've ever had a history. All that stuff drives that story.
Well, it's funny because I'm a big fan of Chet Holmes's Dream 100 concept, and a lot of people say, "Oh, that's too much work," or "It's not worth it." But my comment is, if you're not willing to do a little research, why would you want that client in the first place if they're that insignificant? And I think you and I are going to have more conversations about this, because I, as a salesperson, have lived and breathed the Dream 100. And as a salesperson, I didn't meet all of the criteria. I didn't make enough calls. I didn't do enough cold outreach. I refused to do cold calling. I didn't do door knocking. And yet I was always top of the group, and I closed my quota the first couple weeks of the quarter. And they're like, "Oh, whatever you're doing, it's wrong." And I'm not kidding, Hussain. I had a micromanager who said, "You're going to do it our way or you can leave." And I'm like, "You're going to give your top performer an ultimatum? Guess what? Bye."
I mean, that's the reality. Like, the analogy that I like to draw off of, like, if, and you can see it, like sports are a great parallel to, like, look at it. There used to be this extreme emphasis on the system as the mechanism, and until I'm a big fan of 90s and like early 2000 basketball, so I like to reference it until like until Phil Jackson and others came out, Tex Winter and all these guys came along and said, hey, no, let's get rid of plays. We're just going to have like just this overarching philosophy on how we think things should happen, but we give final discretion to the players, and we just put the players in positions to do their thing. And so then you start to see this rise of like different styles, like, Steph Curry, half of his shots, you're like, no, I don't want anybody else on earth taking those shots, but Steph Curry can do that. Draymond Green, like, you pick all these different players, they all have like unique attributes. And what we actually, as we mature and get more and more sophisticated, we realize actually putting these people in the best possible position to do what they already know how to do, or their muscle memory to do, is the best approach. The converse has been like, no, this is our system, this is our process, this is what we do. I was at EMC. EMC is a very sales-centric culture, and it's very much like we had a very, rigorous process. But the process actually, now that we're talking about this, I'm actually kind of thinking back, enabled all these people to do what they do best. There wasn't definition around how do you sell. This is how we process, how we interact with customers. Here's how we engage with customers. We show up, we respond quickly. Like, these are philosophical things. It wasn't like stage one, stage two, I never even heard of stage one, stage two, stage three until I went to the next organization. They were like, hey, are we helping this customer? Are we solving their problems? These are the conversations they were having. It didn't matter how you did it.
Yeah. And I love that approach. And, unfortunately, a lot of people, they think it's about, I have a friend who works in an organization. Their only criteria is every employee is evaluated on how close they get. Every year, each employee on the sales team has to make 10,000 cold calls.
Yeah.
Now, between you and me, this is the part that fascinates me. I know enough to know that less than 1% of their activity, their result, their clients, comes from cold calling. And 99% comes from meetings and introductions and connections. And it is amazing, because one guy, he figured out he got an auto dialer and he burned through his 10,000 calls in a couple of months. And then he spent the rest of the year actually doing what he needed to do to close deals.
It's funny you say this, like, so I think the existence of the process is relevant for consistency of execution. So it makes sense how you want to get consistent executions from C players, B players, and to an extent on A players. But the reality is, like, the A players will strive it creates strife for them to follow this process, because basically that process is a regression for the mean, right? This is the average performance. When you're at the upper echelon, you're going to be like, well, I'm not average. I don't do it this way. I do it something different, and that gives you the alpha, or the difference between the average and your your A level performance. And I think, like, if I think about it, like that one of the posts that I done in one or two different ways on LinkedIn was like 5x pipeline is the biggest crock. And everybody reacts to that, like salespeople, sales leaders. We all talk. I posted two different iterations on this topic, and different like points of views on this topic, and you get a lot of comments and feedback around it. When you specify a number like that, you will get that number. People get to 5x pipeline. Like when I was told I was constantly on the naughty list for 5x pipeline, like to my boss, I'm like, well, I don't have anything that I would feel comfortable saying this is a deal. And he's like, well, you got to figure out how to get there. So I did what everybody else did, which just made up stuff. And then what happens after you make up stuff is then inspection starts on the stuff you made up, and so you're getting interrogated on transactions aren't real, but you have to go back and forth and just like fill out plans and this and that, and you're like, man, this is doing is taking me from the 3 or 2x that is real. So we did this like experiment, and the leadership I worked for was really comfortable letting us run this experiment, where we ignored those kinds of metrics. Like I ran a sixth of the Americas business for Symantec, and we didn't have the right coverage ratios. We didn't have 5x, 4x. We didn't even have 3x, right? Which was like unheard of. We had roughly 1.5, 2x pipeline coverage. But our point of view was like, no, let's be hyper focused. And I think it's kind of the argument you're saying with Jet Holmes is like hyper focus on a smaller subset, really deeply understand them. And we had roughly 1.5x pipeline coverage. We blew out the number. Like we beat the number. And this is when Symantec was struggling. It was shrinking as a company. We grew 40%. And everybody's like, well, why? And we're like, we just focused on where we thought we could make an impact, and we just shut out everything else. And I think that's really powerful. And I think the reason you couldn't do this in historical constructs, because the only way you could measure progress was volume. Now you can measure it based on like, hey, are we moving these accounts through a progression where they're getting more aware of us, having conversations, deeper conversation? You can actually look at the qualitative stuff and truly understand, are we advancing the account?
I love that, and I think that's in my world, old school go to market, especially in sales. You didn't know till the end of the year if your salespeople were any good or not. There was a lot of fingers crossed and hope for the best, but the assumption was if they do the mechanics, they'll get the outcome. What kind of timeline are you seeing now where you can actually see from effort to impact? How quickly are you seeing that with Revic?
It's almost, so I gotta answer, it's almost immediate, but there are different elements to it. The first level of immediacy is so maybe just one of the things that really deeply surprised me going into like this whole building in the go-to-market space is how much more the account matters than anything else that I thought mattered. I thought salespeople mattered at an extreme, it came from that world. So I was like, yeah, salespeople are the king of all things. Like that's how deals get done. And then what we realized is like actually over 50% of the reason you win is the account itself. And what great salespeople, and then, when you think about this, is actually makes sense. Great salespeople figure out how to do it better, faster, and where the customer is more delighted. That's what you're actually paying them for. And so our first, like when we go into an organization, our first thing is like, hey, all these accounts that you're focused on, where you have active opportunities or believe you have active opportunities, or you have sales reps or marketing people focused on, are never going to convert. So drop them. And usually we get a little bit of pushback. Like we did this with a pretty sizable organization, and we said, hey, you have 15,000 accounts in your CRM that have been assigned out to salespeople and marketing's actively working on. Two-thirds of these are not winnable for you right now. And they were like, they challenged us. They were like, wait, what do you mean? We did all this analysis. We hired all these consultants. We did all this work. And we're like, and then what they did was they overlaid their revenue history against what we were saying to them. And they're like, actually, 90% of our revenue are coming out of the 5,000 accounts you're telling us to go focus on. Oh, you're right. And so then that became the point of view, which is like, okay, let's go double down there, because we already have evidence that says that's true. That was within 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks of us engaging.
Wow.
And then they just rebuilt all the territories based off that point of view. The point of prioritization, the level of like conversations and inspection on those accounts was very different. They didn't jettison the other ones. They kept them, and they just said, hey, we're going to make sure that we as an organization hone in here, and we're going to invest more here, and we're going to build process around these accounts. And that was pretty compelling. And candidly, like, we came into that account sideways, right? So we didn't come in from the top or whatever. We came in through a way that you don't typically come into in order to sell go-to-market technology. And so there was a lot of incentive to dismiss us. But once they just looked at the data and how we explained, like, this is a great account for these reasons, this is a bad account for these reasons, and they started to say, well, actually, you're right, that is a bad account, that is a good account. Hey, can you calibrate the AI this way? Yeah, no problem. It's very compelling.
I love it, because one of the things I realize, there are some rock star salespeople who everybody wants to, copy them. What are activities? What do they do? And the piece that I think is missing between an average and a rock star is a rock star knows where to put their attention. They know where the leverage points are. And it is funny because people will study them and they'll follow them around and they'll say, okay, well, he drinks half calf oat milk latte at noon, so I'm going to drink that. No. He's pondering who he's going to call next while he sips his coffee. There's a difference. I love what you're doing. So what kind of company works with Revic? What industry are you following? How do you help them go to market?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for asking the question. We focus on kind of scale ups and kind of higher growth companies. So Series B and above is kind of our point of focus. We've been slowly moving up market. Customers have been pulling us up. The customers that tend to do really well with us are ones that have pretty horizontal markets. So like anybody can be the point of focus for them. And so they need help kind of really honing in. If you're very verticalized, very specialized, we only service 1,000 companies or 500 companies. It's less interesting. And kind of anybody that's trying to figure out, like, how do I grow more with my existing resources? Obviously, that's a pretty generic statement. So most people are in this boat, but like, output per head, productivity. Those are the things that we help organizations with. The first thing we tend to do is challenge their conception on ICP and how they come up with like the accounts that they should be focused on as an organization. We don't believe that ICP and course attributes are the right thing. We should be able to figure out every account and have a reason for every specific account. And so that's the first thing we tend to do. And then we come up with a point of view for these accounts. These are the messages that matter to this account. And this is how it applies, how your sales playbook applies to this account. These are the people, and this is how your sales book applies, the persona mapping and all the messages that you've created apply to those people. And so we kind of chart a very clear course of like these accounts, this message, these people, this message for these people. It's a pretty clear blueprint. And then as they iterate, our technology automatically picks that up and iterates the point of view on that account. So that's how we work. Generally, we do a pilot on the front end where we show evidence and proof that our technology works. All of our pilots have converted, so we're pretty excited about that. So yeah, that's just a high level.
I love it. Now, I'm going to ask you a really hard question, and I'm going to guess you know the answer. Who actually hires you? And what I mean is, you've mentioned CTO, CFO. I feel like it's a CEO coming to you, but I want to hear from you who actually pulls the trigger, because most CFOs are going to look at cost.
So you spot on. So it's not the CFO. They're not they're not the folks we tend to talk about. Some of our early stage, like Series B and above, like Series B, Series C companies, like those are, even a couple of them that are earlier than that, those were like CEO decisions, because they were like, hey, I need to figure out sales and marketing. Like the inefficiency is very clear across all the functions, and so that's what they care about all of those things. But like as the companies have matured, it's usually the CRO or the head of RevOps that basically engage us. Those tend to be the champions. And occasionally CMO. To be honest, it doesn't, because we take this point of view as like it's a customer. How you talk to them, like what channel you use to talk to them is not what we're focused on. It's what do you say when you do talk to them, and how the channels, the distribution mechanisms. Well, there's a bunch of them. They're all available to use. We don't have any allegiance to any one of them.
Well, one thing I want to underline, you've used the phrase multiple times, and I agree with it, is go to market. One of the things I deal with a lot of founders and a lot of startups, and I get really nervous when they first hire either a CMO or a CRO, and it's like, you need an overall strategy, not a handful of tactics. So the other one is you mentioned the sales playbook. That tells me very specifically who I'm going to send your way, because it takes a certain level of maturity to have spent the time to build the playbook.
I think yes and no, right? Like most of the playbooks we see tend to be pretty outdated. And so like, there are particular artifacts that every organization is generally pretty good about keeping up to date. So like when we come into an organization, the first thing we do is our technology automatically scripts our website. That's the first, like that's the big public presence thing that generally gets updated more frequently than a pitch deck internally or sales playbooks internally or any of that stuff. Then the second artifact that we use is like the sales presentations. And then we look at a bunch of recordings. And then that gives the basically we call this the seed of how the AI is supposed to think.
Yeah.
And then we calibrate. We talk to a bunch of salespeople, the reps. Like we want their feedback, because like they're living, breathing this thing. And then we start to reconcile the delta between what they're seeing and what they're saying, and what they're experiencing with customers, and what all the public artifacts are that exist in order to like help them. So the artifacts themselves don't matter, whether it's a sales playbook or if it's we can start with very little, as long as there's a website that has content and we can start to extract. And then we use agents to reason out, like, okay, this is probably your sales playbooks. These are your core value props. This is what you're advocating for the marketplace.
I love that. And for anybody listening, these are, it's interesting you use the word artifact, because some of them, it is an ancient artifact. You come in, you blow the dust off and go, okay, I'm guessing nobody follows this. But I would say what you've listed is sort of a go-to-market checklist, because if you don't, by the way, my number one thing that makes my head explode, you'd be amazed how many marketers I talk to who don't know what an ICP is. And worse, they don't know what their ICP is. And I'm like, okay, stop there. I know already you're not helping people. You're spending their money.
It's funny you say that. Like, I see this, like, everybody spends a lot, like most of the organizations we've dealt with have spent a little bit of time or a lot of time on ICP. And even like I did this all the time, but like, you no matter what, as long as when you're looking at the data, you have like a recency bias that just kind of injects in there. And then I think so that like that, pollutes it a little bit.
Yeah.
The second big piece is like we need to accept that there can be three ICPs in truth. There's the product side, which is driving product strategy for the next 2 to 5 years. There's the marketing side, which is trying to create demand 6+ months out. And then there's a sales side, which is like, I want to transact now, 90-day cycles. Those are all different things. Sales wants to talk about, here's what our product does right now. I don't want to talk about anything that's coming out in 6 months. Like marketing, you warm up the next tranche. And as soon as those are warmed up, then, like the concept is sound, which is like this waterfall funnel kind of mechanism. Yeah. The thing that's struggle. People try to collapse this and converge this into a singular thing. Hard. So you should have those 3 time horizons in the point of view. But you're right. Like a lot of people struggle with defining their ICP.
Well, and it's funny because I look at my ICP. I view it as a movie. It's kind of the hero's journey. They're at different points in their life, not in my funnel, but in their life. And I try to find ways to reach them and communicate with them at that point. And I think that's the thing. If you turn it sideways, it looks like you're looking at one picture of one person. But if you fold it out, it's like one of those little paper dolls. They're not all identical. There's different wants, needs, etc. And
that's actually the point. Like every customer is different, right? So like the idea that we can just cohort them and say, no, this is everybody broad-based. Man, yeah, I'm sure I have attributes and buying preferences that are very similar to other people. But man, I go through like my wife can't even figure out how I decide on a purchase. Like how is like, how, like, and she's unlucky for her, she gets to deal with me all the time. But you know what I mean? Like, so like for us to think like all these customers are going to be the same, they're not. But the good thing about the world we're in today is that they give off a lot of indicators, breadcrumbs that we can piece together and say, oh no, this is how this is where the consistency is, and this is where this customer is unique or this customer is unique. And if you show up with uniqueness, like we've had literally sales reps take our point of view and account and say, hey, these are the 4 priorities for this customer. They've taken that verbatim and put it in front of the customer. The customer's like, how did you get that? That's exactly what I care about.
Yeah.
And they, one customer called me afterwards and said, hey, we told them it was for you guys. I hope this is not a problem. I was like, no, like this is what a great sales team does, or go-to-market team. And the customer reached out and was like, hey, how did you guys figure this out? I was like, hey, you guys, there's all this, you've been on podcasts, you've done posts, LinkedIn posts, this stuff, this is all public domain information that we're piecing together to come up with a narrative. So it's really interesting. It's really fun.
It's funny. I have a friend who works in cybersecurity, and his area is open source intelligence, where they scan social media to find threat actors. And I do that with my prospects because I want to know what they're complaining about. I want to know, oh, they're not real happy with that company. Why is that? And my wife finds it very troublesome because I absolutely hate people who go on Reddit to look for life advice. And she's like, yeah, you research. And I'm like, no, there's a difference. I'm looking for what people are complaining about. Yeah. I'm not trusting some random stranger with, here's how you fix your computer.
Yeah. No, but like you're on point. Like there's so much great information out there. It's like, how do you synthesize it into a story that we on our side can absorb? AI can read all this stuff and be like, here's a bunch of information, but like we need a story that we can connect with and be like, okay, I can use this in a conversation.
Yeah. And I find it fascinating because with AI, we can take generic marketing content, we can take generic sales, customer service, and we can bespoke it so that this is Hussain's path through this company. And yet people still say it's too much work. And it's like, but, I look at my 2 companies I hold up above all else are Apple and Harley Davidson, because they're diehard fans. I mean, Harley people will get tattoos on their body of the brand. That's what you want today, I believe, is that loyalty. You don't want to be something they can put in a shopping cart and compare next to 1,000 other generic items and pick the lowest cost.
You're spot. I think the thing, like, just I've never, I aspired to ride a motorcycle. I signed up for motorcycle lessons. I just never pulled the actual trigger of going because I'm deathly terrified of what I would do on a bicycle, on a bike, motorcycle. But I love, like, I have a bunch of friends that have Harleys, and they talk about how, like, when you're on the road, you're road tripping with a Harley, and something breaks, you are at the top of the queue when you go to a Harley Davidson dealership. What that really means is like, hey, we are dialed into our customers. We're understanding, hey, you're on the road. This is probably what this means. Like being off out of commission for 2 or 3 days breaks your whole trip, which breaks the reason you bought the bike, which breaks this, so they're like, basically what we're kind of seeing, the way you create diehard thing is you deeply understand your customers. And if you can get to a customer one, if they're like, hey, no, Jeff likes this thing when he shows up. Hey, actually, you know what? There's a cup of coffee with your exact like vanilla latte. I don't know what you drink, but I'm just gonna like with two pumps of whatever. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, man, these guys really know me.
Well,
And that makes you feel special.
Little thing, but Starbucks writes your name on the cup. That's because people go, oh, my name's on it. You know, it's my coffee. Now I could talk to you for hours about all of this stuff, but I will respect your time. Is there something I should have asked you that I haven't?
I think we covered everything, so I'm pretty excited. And, you know, I will say, like, you know, the thing we didn't really talk as much about is like the fear around AI. I think that's on some level it's a new thing. It is disruptive. There's a lot around it, and you know, there's a lot of people that are saying it's not AI that's going to take your job away. It's people that are using AI. I think that's 100% true. That's a like truth. I mean, if you rewind back, people using the internet beat out people that weren't using the internet. People using calculators beat out people that weren't using calculators. So that's true. Is the material advantage? Are there jobs that will go away? Yes, for sure. But I think we're getting to the more honesty for every job, which is like, hey, I'm here. I'm hiring you to people. You're going to do more of it. And so if you really enjoy that, then you should be in sales. If you don't really enjoy that, then you should be in sales. If you're in marketing and you love kind of creating a great narrative for customers and experience for not customers to engage with a brand, that's really fun, because now we've taken away all the mechanics of how you execute these things. The way AI will start to do all that stuff, and will start to synthesize patterns so that you can come up with the next cool creative ideas. That's really exciting. And I think that's true across all domains. Like our engineers don't write integration tests, like, you know, testing their code. If it works, that's all AI now. So like, they don't want to do it anyways. They don't want to create documentation. Nobody wants to create those things. They want to come up with a cool way of solving this problem and then use mechanisms. So I think that's what's really exciting about and I think we didn't spend a ton of time talking about it, but I think it's really relevant.
Well, we did and we didn't. I think we talked about it by not talking about it, because I think the way I view AI, and I think you agree, is in the hands of a smart person, it makes them smarter. In the hands of somebody who's incompetent, it just makes it dangerous. I say it's a little like watching a toddler play with a jetpack. Something bad's going to happen.
or something great. So
yeah, exactly.
Let's see. But yeah, it does unlock human ingenuity. That's I think what's really interesting.
I love it. Now, where can people go to connect with you, Hussain, or to learn more about Revic?
I think a couple places. Obviously, our website is easy. You can shoot me an email, h@revic.ai, or my LinkedIn. We'll drop that, I think, in the show notes. Those are the easiest ways to reach out.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you. It's not often I get to talk go-to-market as an umbrella, so thank you for hanging out, and it was a real pleasure having you on the show.
Vice versa. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, Jeff.